Billionaire bets he can make delivery girl date him in 7 days, but she surprises him and makes him want to marry her and have children. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. Alexander Blackwood leaned back in his Italian leather chair, swirling aged whiskey in a crystal tumbler as he gazed out from his penthouse office. 65 floors above Manhattan, the city sprawled below like a personal kingdom. At 35, he'd amassed a fortune that most couldn't achieve in 10 lifetimes. Blackwood Industries dominated tech markets globally, and Alexander dominated Blackwood Industries. So you've never failed? At anything? Lucas Hayes, his CFO and oldest friend, lounged on the white leather sofa, skepticism etched across his features. Alexander's lips curled into a smile that had graced the covers of business magazines worldwide. Not at anything that matters. That's statistically impossible, Alex. Even for you. Alexander shrugged, the movement barely disturbing his impeccably tailored Tom Ford suit. Statistics don't apply to men who rewrite them. Lucas rolled his eyes, familiar with his friend's arrogance. They'd met at Harvard, where Alexander had graduated 2 years early with dual degrees. Even then, he'd possessed a certainty about his future that bordered on prophetic. Everything in life is a transaction, Alexander continued. Identify what people want, offer it with the right terms, and they'll give you whatever you ask for. Business, politics. His smile widened. Romance. Oh, please, Lucas groaned. You don't transact your way into love. Love is just chemistry and timing. The rest is negotiation. Lucas studied his friend. Behind the confidence, he sensed something hollow. Alexander collected achievements like trophies, but genuine connection had always eluded him. 3 failed engagements to women from his social circle had left him cynical. You think you can make anyone fall for you, don't you? Lucas challenged. Given the right approach and sufficient motivation, yes. Alexander's tone was matter-of-fact. People are predictable. That's a convenient belief for someone afraid of actual vulnerability. Alexander's jaw tightened briefly before he masked it. Your amateur psychology is showing, Lucas. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Mr. Blackwood, your lunch delivery is here. Send them in. The double doors opened, revealing a young woman in worn jeans and a faded blue delivery jacket with Gino's Italian emblazoned across the back. She carried a large paper bag that filled the office with the aroma of garlic and basil. Sorry for the delay, she said, moving toward the conference table. Traffic was a nightmare on 5th Avenue. Alexander barely glanced up as she arranged containers on the table. Just another service worker in the background of his life. That'll be $94.75, she announced, turning to face him. Something in her voice, a confidence unusual for someone in her position, made Alexander look up properly. His practiced indifference faltered momentarily. She wasn't beautiful in the conventional polished way of the women who typically orbited his world. Her curly brown hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, with strands escaping to frame a heart-shaped face. No makeup apart from what might be a trace of faded mascara, but her eyes, large, expressive, and a startling shade of amber, held something that caught his attention: intelligence, and notably a complete lack of intimidation in his presence. Is there a problem? She asked, one eyebrow raised when his gaze lingered too long. Alexander recovered quickly. No. My assistant normally handles payment. Well, your assistant isn't here, and I've got 8 more deliveries waiting. She extended her hand expectantly. Lucas watched the exchange with growing amusement, pulling out his wallet. I've got it, Alex. No need. Alexander reached for his own wallet, producing a $100 bill. Keep the change. Thanks. She pocketed the money without the effusive gratitude such tips usually elicited. Enjoy your lunch, gentlemen. As she turned to leave, Alexander noticed a worn paperback tucked in her back pocket. Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. Interesting reading for delivery runs, he commented. She paused, glancing back with surprise that he'd noticed. The subway rides between deliveries add up. Besides, someone should be contemplating the moral complexity of ruthless ambition in this building. The comment was delivered with a slight smile that softened the critique. Lucas coughed to disguise a laugh. Alexander felt an unfamiliar sensation, the brief disorientation of someone who'd gone off script. You're critiquing capitalism while delivering $95 lunches? I'm participating in the system that exists while reading about better ones. Pragmatism meets idealism. She shrugged. We all contain multitudes. Before Alexander could respond, his phone rang, the special tone reserved for his most important client. Excuse me, I need to take this. He turned away dismissively, expecting her to disappear back into the anonymous army of service workers that kept his world running. Lucas showed her out, returning moments later with a thoughtful expression. Her name's Maya Russo. She's working 3 jobs while finishing her master's thesis in social economics, and she just thoroughly read you in under 30 seconds. Alexander ended his call, irritation flickering across his features. She's a delivery person who happens to read Russian literature. Let's not exaggerate her depth. That's exactly the kind of dismissive assumption she was calling out. Lucas settled back on the sofa, a challenge forming. You know what? I've just figured out how to prove your anyone can be transacted theory wrong. I'm listening. A wager. You have 7 days to make that delivery girl agree to date you. Alexander scoffed. That's hardly challenging. Money opens most doors. Without revealing your identity or using your wealth and power, Lucas clarified. She has to be interested in you, the actual human being beneath the wealth. Why would I waste my time on that? Because if I'm right, if she turns you down, you donate $50 million to her choice of charity and admit that not everything in life can be negotiated. Alexander's competitive instinct flared. And when I win, I'll stop pestering you about finding authentic connection and admit your transactional worldview is correct. Make it $100 million, Lucas whistled. Confident, aren't you? Always. Alexander extended his hand. Deal. They shook on it, but Lucas wasn't finished. One more condition. You record daily updates about your progress. Honest ones. I want to document this properly. Fine. But no interference. After Lucas left, Alexander remained at the window, contemplating the challenge. It was ridiculous, of course. 7 days to make a delivery girl fall for him, without using his most powerful assets? Still, something about her lingered in his mind. That unflinching gaze, the subtle challenge in her voice. He picked up his phone. Janet, get me everything you can find on a Maya Russo. She delivers for Gino's Italian. I want education history, employment records, social media, address, regular hangouts, and tell Gino's I want her assigned to all our lunch deliveries this week. Alexander Blackwood didn't approach challenges half-heartedly. If he was playing this game, he would win it like he won everything else, with thorough preparation and strategic execution. What he didn't anticipate was how this particular game would change all his carefully constructed rules. Later that evening, Maya climbed the 5 flights of stairs to her apartment in Queens, legs aching from miles of delivery routes. The ancient elevator had been temporarily out of service for the 14 months she'd lived there. She balanced a bag of groceries while fumbling for her keys. Inside, the apartment was small but meticulously organized. Bookshelves lined every available wall, crammed with well-worn volumes. A second-hand desk occupied the corner by the window, covered with research papers and a laptop held together with duct tape. "Honey, I'm home," she called out sarcastically to the empty apartment, dropping her keys in a ceramic bowl painted with sunflowers, a gift from her grandmother. Maya kicked off her sneakers and collapsed onto the worn sofa, a thrift store find she'd reupholstered herself. She closed her eyes, allowing herself exactly 3 minutes of exhaustion before forcing herself back up. No time for fatigue. Her thesis wouldn't write itself, and her tuition payment was due in 3 weeks. As she unpacked groceries, calculated to provide maximum nutrition at minimum cost, her mind drifted back to the man in the penthouse office. She'd delivered to Blackwood Industries before, but usually to lower floors. She hadn't realized she was facing the Alexander Blackwood until after she'd left. Lucas Hayes had mentioned his name while showing her out, and the pieces fell into place. "Congratulations, Maya," she muttered to herself. "You just sassed one of the richest men in America." Her phone chimed with a text from her roommate and best friend, Zoe. "Working late shift. Leftover lasagna in fridge. Don't wait up." Maya heated the lasagna and settled at her desk, opening her thesis document. 3 pages in, her concentration broke. She couldn't stop thinking about the look on Blackwood's face when she'd mentioned ruthless ambition, a flash of something genuine beneath the practiced arrogance. She shook her head, refocusing on her work. Men like Alexander Blackwood weren't worth a second thought. They moved through the world taking what they wanted, insulated from consequences by wealth and privilege. Yet something about their brief interaction nagged at her. It wasn't attraction, though she wasn't blind to his obvious physical appeal. It was the momentary glimpse of something unguarded, something almost vulnerable that had flickered across his face. "Enough," she told herself firmly. "Statistics chapters don't write themselves." Maya returned to her thesis, unaware that across the city, Alexander Blackwood was studying her entire life history, strategizing how to win her over like a general planning a military campaign. Unaware that in 7 days, her carefully structured world would be turned completely upside down. Neither of them could possibly anticipate how thoroughly they would change each other's lives. Alexander studied the dossier on Maya Russo as he sipped his morning espresso. His assistant had been thorough, compiling a comprehensive profile overnight. 27 years old. Parents immigrated from Italy when she was 5. Father a carpenter, mother a seamstress, both deceased in a car accident when Maya was 19, graduated summa cum laude from CUNY despite working throughout college, currently pursuing a master's in social economics at Columbia, researching wealth inequality and sustainable economic models. "Ironic," he murmured. Beyond work and school, Maya volunteered at a community literacy program in her Queens neighborhood. Her social media presence was minimal. No Instagram, a rarely used Facebook account, and a Twitter profile where she occasionally shared articles about economic reform, financial status, perpetually precarious, student loans, a small life insurance payment from her parents, and 3 part-time jobs keeping her afloat. Delivery work at Geno's, weekend shifts at a bookstore, and online research assistance for a progressive think tank. Alexander closed the file, contemplating his approach. Clearly, flaunting wealth would backfire spectacularly with someone whose thesis literally critiqued excessive accumulation of capital. He needed to appear ordinary, relatable. The very concept was foreign to him. He picked up his phone. "Janet, cancel my meetings today, and send someone to purchase casual clothes. Jeans, t-shirts, nothing with visible designer labels." "Sir?" His assistant's confusion was evident. "I need to go undercover for a few days." After a moment's hesitation, "Yes, Mr. Blackwood." 2 hours later, Alexander examined himself in his penthouse mirror. The dark jeans, gray t-shirt, and navy jacket felt strangely informal, like a costume for a role he'd never played. He'd removed his Patek Philippe watch and Bulgari cufflinks, leaving his wrists conspicuously bare. "Ridiculous," he muttered, running a hand through his meticulously styled hair, deliberately mussing it for a more casual appearance. Still, the man in the mirror exuded privilege. The clothes might be ordinary, but his posture, his grooming, even the confidence in his gaze marked him as someone accustomed to the finest things. Alexander sighed. This would be more challenging than anticipated. According to the schedule Janet had procured, Maya was working at Forward Books in Brooklyn today. He'd have to approach as a customer, initiate conversation naturally, and make an impression strong enough to build upon. Simple in theory. In practice, he'd never actually pursued a woman without the context of his wealth and status creating immediate interest. 40 minutes later, Alexander pushed open the door of the small bookstore, a bell chiming softly above him. The space was cozy and well-worn, with mismatched chairs tucked between crowded shelves and the scent of paper and coffee lingering in the air. He spotted Maya immediately, shelving books near the back, a red sweater replacing yesterday's delivery uniform. He wandered through the stacks, selecting a book on economic theory to establish common ground. As he approached the counter, Maya turned, recognition flickering in her eyes before she masked it with professional detachment. "Finding everything okay?" she asked neutrally. Alexander placed the book on the counter. "Yes, thank you." He paused, an uncharacteristic uncertainty creeping in. "Actually, I was hoping for a recommendation. Something challenging." Maya studied him, suspicion evident. "You're the guy from Blackwood Industries yesterday." "Alexander," he offered, extending his hand. "I didn't think you'd remember me. Delivery people aren't actually invisible despite how we're treated." She didn't take his hand. "What are you doing in Brooklyn? Seems a bit far from your natural habitat." "I had meetings in the area." He lied smoothly. "Thought I'd browse before heading back to Manhattan." "In jeans and without your entourage?" "Interesting." Alexander realized his mistake immediately. She was more observant than he'd anticipated. "I dress more casually outside the office." "Right." Her skepticism was palpable. "So, a challenging read. Any particular subject?" He abandoned his rehearsed approach. If she already recognized him, authenticity might be the better strategy. "Something that might challenge my worldview. You seemed unimpressed with it yesterday." A flicker of surprise crossed her features. "That's unexpectedly self-aware." "I'm full of surprises." Maya considered him for a moment before walking to a nearby shelf. "Try this." She handed him a book titled The Economics of Enough: How to Run the Economy as If the Future Matters. "Light bedtime reading?" he asked wryly. "You asked for challenging." A ghost of a smile played at her lips. "It offers perspectives on sustainability that contradict the endless growth model driving most corporate empires. Including mine? Especially yours." The candor in her voice was refreshing after years of people telling him exactly what they thought he wanted to hear. Alexander took the book, deliberately letting his fingers brush against hers. "I'll take it." Bold choice for someone who exemplifies everything the author critiques. "Perhaps I'm more complex than you assume." He held her gaze, enjoying the spark of irritation it elicited. Doubtful, but everyone deserves the benefit of optimism. She rang up his purchase. "That'll be $24.95. Alexander reached for his wallet, suddenly realizing his predicament. He carried no cash, only his black Amex card, a dead giveaway of his status. "I seem to have forgotten my wallet," he improvised. "Could I come back tomorrow to pick it up?" Maya's expression shifted from skepticism to outright suspicion. "You came to Brooklyn without your wallet?" "It seems so." She studied him for a long moment. "Why are you really here, Alexander?" The direct question caught him off guard. "I told you." "No, you fed me some line about meetings. Nobody from Blackwood Industries happens to wander into an independent bookstore in Brooklyn." Her amber eyes narrowed. "What do you want?" Alexander considered lying again but calculated that honesty, or a version of it, might yield better results. "I was intrigued by our conversation yesterday. You're different from most people I encounter." "Different how? Because I don't fawn over your obvious wealth and status?" "Precisely." Maya seemed taken aback by his candor. "So you tracked me down because, what, I'm a novelty? Someone not immediately impressed by your Forbes ranking?" "When you put it that way, it sounds rather shallow." "It is shallow." She leaned against the counter. "Look, I don't know what game you're playing, but I'm not interested in being an eccentric addition to your social circle, or a challenge to conquer." That's not. Your book is on the house, she interrupted. Consider it an investment in your moral education. She turned away, clearly dismissing him. Alexander stood there, unaccustomed to being dismissed by anyone, let alone a bookstore clerk. The interaction had gone nothing like his carefully planned scenario. He'd underestimated her perceptiveness and overestimated his ability to appear ordinary. I apologize, he said finally. You're right, I shouldn't have come here under false pretenses. Maya paused, glancing back with surprise at his admission. Let me try again. Would you have coffee with me, just to talk? Why would I do that? Because beneath your justified skepticism, you're curious. He offered his most genuine smile, the one rarely seen in boardrooms or press photos. And because I genuinely found our conversation yesterday refreshing. Maya studied him, conflicting emotions crossing her face. I don't date customers or billionaires. It's just coffee, not a merger proposal. Besides, right now I'm just a guy without a wallet who's been thoroughly called out on his pretense. Against her better judgment, Maya felt a smile tugging at her lips. There was something almost charming about seeing the mighty Alexander Blackwood humbled, however, temporarily. Fine, one coffee, but not today. I have a paper due. Tomorrow at Hazelnut Cafe on 7th Avenue, noon. Noon, he confirmed, surprised at his own relief. Thank you. As Alexander left the bookstore, he realized he was still carrying the unpaid-for book. More surprisingly, he actually wanted to read it. Back in his penthouse that evening, Alexander recorded his daily update for Lucas. Day 1 of your ridiculous challenge. Initial contact established, though not as smoothly as anticipated. Maya recognized me, which complicated the approach. However, I've secured a coffee meeting for tomorrow. Her defenses are substantial but not impenetrable. She's intelligent, perceptive, and refreshingly direct. The lack of sycophancy is unusual. I'm adjusting my strategy accordingly. He paused, considering whether to admit the rest, then continued grudgingly. I underestimated the difficulty of appearing ordinary. Wealth isn't just what I have, it's fundamentally who I am. Removing visible signifiers doesn't change the underlying reality. Alexander ended the recording, then opened Maya's recommended book. He'd intended to skim it for conversational fodder, but found himself genuinely engaged by the arguments challenging his fundamental business philosophies. By 2 a.m., he'd filled the margins with notes, some dismissive, others thoughtful. Across the city, Maya sat at her desk, research papers spread around her as she worked on her thesis. Her roommate Zoe leaned against the doorframe, eyebrows raised. Wait, Alexander Blackwood? The Alexander Blackwood asked you out, and you said yes? It's coffee, not a date, Maya corrected, not looking up from her laptop. And I only agreed because he seemed so pathetically out of place trying to act like a normal human. Uh-huh. Zoe's tone was skeptical. Nothing to do with the fact that he's gorgeous, brilliant, and could fund your entire research project with his pocket change? Maya finally looked up. You know my feelings about wealth concentration. Men like him are literally the problem I'm studying. Men like him, sure. But him specifically? You have to admit, there's something compelling about someone who built an empire from nothing. Built on exploited labor and environmental degradation. Maya sighed. I'm going because I'm curious why he's slumming it in Brooklyn bookstores when he could be on his private island. And maybe to deliver a few unfiltered opinions about economic justice to someone who could actually impact systemic change. Maya grinned. Consider it field research. Zoe laughed. Just be careful. Men with that much power aren't used to hearing no. Trust me, I have absolutely no interest in Alexander Blackwood beyond intellectual curiosity. As Maya returned to her thesis, she found her thoughts drifting to tomorrow's coffee meeting. Despite her protestations to Zoe, she couldn't deny a certain curiosity about the man behind the billion-dollar empire. Not attraction, she told herself firmly, just academic interest in a living embodiment of the system she critiqued. Meanwhile, Alexander closed Maya's book, troubled by arguments he couldn't easily dismiss. Tomorrow's coffee would be more than a step toward winning his wager. It would be a genuine chance to understand a perspective fundamentally opposed to his own. Neither realized that their carefully constructed worldviews were already beginning to shift. The Hazelnut Cafe was nothing like the sleek establishments Alexander typically frequented. Mismatched furniture crowded the small space, walls adorned with local artwork, and the menu was handwritten on a chalkboard behind the counter. No host greeted him, no staff rushed to pull out his chair. Anonymity felt distinctly uncomfortable. Alexander arrived 15 minutes early, selecting a corner table that offered both privacy and a view of the entrance. He wore dark jeans and a simple button-down shirt, casual by most standards, though the fabric quality and tailoring still betrayed expense to a discerning eye. The book Maya had recommended sat on the table beside him. He'd finished it at 3 a.m., troubled by arguments that challenged the very foundation of his business philosophy. Alexander had built Blackwood Industries on the principle of maximizing growth and shareholder value above all else. The book presented compelling evidence that such models ultimately self-destructed, consuming the very resources and social structures they depended upon. Maya arrived precisely at noon, wrapped in a green cardigan over a simple white blouse. Her curly hair was loose today, falling past her shoulders in unruly waves. She spotted him immediately, offering a reserved nod as she approached. "You actually read it," she observed, noting the book's obviously handled state. Alexander gestured to the seat across from him. "Cover to cover. Some compelling arguments, though I disagree with the premise that growth and sustainability are fundamentally incompatible." "Of course you do." Maya sat down, studying him with open curiosity. "It would be impossible to maintain your position while accepting that premise." "Cognitive dissonance isn't my style." He smiled. "I prefer to confront contradictions directly." "Is that why you're here? Confronting the contradiction of someone who isn't impressed by your empire?" "Perhaps I'm simply enjoying conversation that doesn't revolve around quarterly projections and stock options." A server approached, saving Alexander from further exposure. Maya ordered a simple black coffee. Alexander requested the same, though he typically preferred precisely prepared espresso. "So," Maya began when they were alone again, "what did you actually think of the book?" Alexander considered deflecting but opted for honesty. It's easier to dismiss economic dissidents when they're idealistic college students or anti-capitalist protesters. The author uses capitalism's own metrics to demonstrate its unsustainability. That's harder to ignore. Maya's expression softened slightly at his genuine response. The system rewards short-term thinking and externalizes true costs. It's mathematics, not ideology. The mathematics assume fixed variables that aren't necessarily fixed. Innovation changes the equation. Innovation driven by profit motives addresses symptoms, not root causes. She leaned forward. Your own company's green initiatives, carbon offsets, recycling programs, they're band-aids on bullet wounds. Alexander raised an eyebrow. You've researched Blackwood Industries? Know thy enemy, she replied with a slight smile. I study wealth inequality. Your company is a case study in how modern capitalism concentrates resources. You see me as the enemy? I see the system as the enemy. You're just its most successful player. Their coffees arrived. Maya sipped hers black, while Alexander found himself missing the precisely calibrated blend his personal chef prepared each morning. Tell me about your research, he said, genuinely curious. Maya hesitated, as if weighing whether his interest was sincere. I'm examining alternative economic models that promote equitable distribution without sacrificing efficiency. Stakeholder-driven structures, community wealth building, regenerative economic flows. Sounds utopian. Is a livable planet where people's basic needs are met really so utopian? She shook her head. That's how broken our expectations have become. Alexander found himself drawn to her passion, the way her eyes lit up when discussing concepts she cared about. Unlike the calculated enthusiasm of his usual associates, Maya's conviction appeared entirely genuine. You're right about one thing, he conceded. The current model isn't sustainable long-term. Maya's surprise at his admission was evident. Yet Blackwood Industries continues expanding aggressively. The game has established rules. I didn't create them. But you enforce them. You have the power to change them. You overestimate a single company's influence. Do I? Maya challenged. Your personal wealth exceeds the GDP of 40 countries. Your company employs over 200,000 people. The politicians you support shape policy. If you don't have the power to create change, who does? Alexander fell silent, unaccustomed to being held personally accountable. In his world, business was business, impersonal, strategic, divorced from moral considerations beyond legal compliance. What about you? He countered, shifting focus. 3 jobs while completing a master's degree. That's impressive dedication. That's economic necessity. My parents didn't leave me a trust fund. They left you something more valuable. Determination. Maya's expression softened unexpectedly. They did. My father worked 14-hour days building other people's dream homes while we lived in a tiny apartment. My mother altered expensive clothes for wealthy women while making our clothes from remnants. She traced the rim of her coffee cup. They believed education was the path to stability. When they died, continuing seemed the only way to honor their sacrifice. This unguarded glimpse into her life affected Alexander more than he anticipated. I'm sorry about your parents. Thank you. Her response was quiet, genuine. My parents died too, he found himself saying. Car accident when I was 12. I know. It was in your Forbes profile. The profile didn't mention that my father was driving drunk or that my mother enabled his alcoholism for years. Alexander rarely discussed this truth. The official story is more palatable for shareholders. Maya studied him with newfound interest. That must have been difficult. My grandfather raised me afterward, taught me that wealth was the only true protection in an uncertain world. Alexander shrugged. Hence my dedication to accumulating it. Security through accumulation is an illusion, Maya said gently. None of your billions prevented my parents' accident or yours. The observation struck with unexpected force. Before Alexander could respond, Maya's phone alarm chimed. I have to get to class, she said, gathering her things. This was not what I expected. In a good way, I hope? Alexander found himself genuinely concerned about her answer. Maya considered him. Let's say I'm reserving judgment. Would you reserve judgment over dinner tomorrow? The words emerged before strategic calculation could filter them. She hesitated. I have work until 8. After 8 then. Why are you pursuing this, Alexander? We inhabit completely different worlds. He could have offered a practiced line, something smooth and flattering. Instead, he opted for a version of the truth. Because you challenge me. Most people tell me what they think I want to hear. You tell me what you actually think. Maya appeared conflicted. Florrie's on 9th Street, 8:30. They serve the best Italian food outside of my Nonna's kitchen. I'll be there. After she left, Alexander remained at the table contemplating their conversation. The coffee had been mediocre, the cafe noisy and inefficient, yet it had been the most stimulating hour he'd spent in months. Maya's perspective was fascinating, not just her critique of his business practices, but her entire worldview, shaped by experiences so different from his own. For the first time, he felt a twinge of discomfort about the wager with Lucas. There was something distasteful about reducing Maya to a conquest, especially after glimpsing the authenticity behind her defenses. That evening, Alexander recorded his update. Day 2, coffee meeting successful, dinner arranged for tomorrow. Maya is not what I expected. Her critiques of capitalism are surprisingly sophisticated. She sees systemic issues clearly, but without the typical resentment of the unsuccessful. There's a genuine intellectual foundation to her position. He paused, then added more quietly. She maintains significant skepticism about my motives, which is justified. I'm beginning to question them myself. Across the city, Maya walked into her apartment to find Zoe waiting expectantly on the couch. Well, how was coffee with the billionaire? Did he arrive in a golden carriage? Maya dropped her backpack and collapsed beside her friend. It was confusing. Confusing how? He actually read the book I recommended, had intelligent things to say about it. Maya stared at the ceiling, and he seemed genuinely interested in my research. Shocking. Attractive woman, attractive man, mutual interest, alert the media. It's not like that, Maya insisted. We're fundamentally opposed on virtually everything that matters. Except you agreed to have dinner with him tomorrow. Zoe's expression turned serious. Maya, what are you doing? This guy represents everything you're fighting against in your work. I know. Maya covered her face with a throw pillow. But there were moments when he seemed real, not just the polished billionaire persona. Just be careful. Men like that are used to getting what they want. Trust me, I have no illusions about Alexander Blackwood. But as Maya returned to her thesis that night, her thoughts kept drifting to their conversation. Behind his privilege and power, she'd glimpsed something unexpected. Vulnerability when he spoke about his parents, genuine consideration when engaging with ideas that challenged his worldview. She told herself her interest was purely academic. Alexander Blackwood personified the system she critiqued. Understanding him offered insight into the mentality that drove wealth accumulation. Nothing more. Yet something told her she was already lying to herself. In his penthouse, Alexander found himself doing something unprecedented, researching sustainable business models, examining case studies of companies that had successfully balanced profit with social responsibility. The rational part of his mind insisted this was merely preparation for their dinner, gathering intellectual ammunition to counter Maya's arguments. But another part recognized a more troubling truth. Her words had affected him. The certainty that had driven his entire career suddenly seemed less absolute. As he closed his laptop, Alexander reminded himself of the wager's terms. 7 days to make Maya agree to date him. He was making progress, yet the victory he'd been so confident about now felt hollow in prospect. For the first time in years, Alexander Blackwood found himself questioning not just his strategy, but the game itself. Florey's was nothing like the Michelin-starred establishments Alexander frequented. Nestled between a laundromat and a hardware store, the small restaurant had no valet, no host stand, and no reservation system. Red checkered tablecloths covered wooden tables and family photos lined walls painted the colors of the Italian flag. The scent of garlic, tomatoes, and fresh basil created an atmosphere more authentic than any upscale Italian restaurant he'd visited. Alexander arrived at 8:20, dressed in what his stylist assured him was casual elegance: dark jeans, a charcoal sweater over a blue button-down, and leather boots that cost more than most people's monthly rent but looked deceptively simple. He'd left his usual accessories behind, though he felt oddly naked without his watch. An elderly woman with silver hair and weathered hands greeted him with boisterous warmth. "Welcome to Florey's. You must be Maya's friend. She called to say you're coming." "Alexander," he introduced himself, extending his hand. She ignored his hand and pulled him into a robust hug instead. "I'm Nonna Florey. Any friend of Maya is family here." She patted his cheek. "Too skinny. We fix that." Before he could respond, she led him to a corner table partially hidden by a brick archway. Maya's favorite spot. Private, yes? Good for conversation. Alexander thanked her, bemused by the informal treatment. In his world, restaurateurs treated him with reverent deference, reserving the best tables, remembering his preferences, never presuming familiarity. "Wine?" Florey asked. "Whatever you recommend," Alexander replied, deciding to embrace the experience. She returned with a carafe of ruby liquid. "My brother's vineyard in Tuscany. No fancy label. Just good wine. Alexander took a sip, surprised by the complex flavor. This is excellent. Of course it is. Florrie beamed. Mass production ruins wine like it ruins everything beautiful. Small batch made with love. That's the secret. As she bustled away, Alexander considered how her philosophy directly contradicted the economy of scale that had built his fortune. Blackwood Industries thrived on standardization and mass production. I see you've met Nonna Florrie. Alexander looked up to find Maya standing beside the table, cheeks flushed from the cold, her curls wilder than usual beneath a knitted beanie. She'd changed into a simple green dress that complemented her amber eyes. She's memorable, he replied, standing to greet her. She practically raised me after my parents died. Maya removed her coat, revealing the dress's modest scoop neck. Her restaurant became my second home. Alexander held her chair, an instinctive courtesy that earned him a raised eyebrow but also a small smile. She clearly cares about you. Nonna believes food is love made visible. Maya settled across from him. Fair warning, she'll try to fatten you up. Apparently you're too skinny, she added, mimicking Florrie's accent. I've been called many things, but too skinny is a first. Maya laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her usually guarded expression. Wealth and power mean nothing to Nonna. She judges people on appetite and appreciation of her food. I'll do my best to meet her standards. Don't worry, we won't be ordering from menus. Nonna will bring what she thinks we should eat. As if on cue, Florrie returned with a platter of antipasti, cured meats, cheeses, marinated vegetables, and fresh bread. Mangia, good food, good conversation, this is living. The informal approach was refreshingly different from Alexander's usual dining experiences, where every element was calibrated to his preferences. Here, surrendering control felt strangely liberating. So, Maya began, spreading roasted red pepper on bread, have you had any earth-shattering revelations since yesterday about economic justice? I spent 3 hours researching alternative business models last night, Alexander admitted. Your stakeholder-driven approach has historical precedent in Japanese keiretsu systems. Maya paused mid-bite, surprise evident. You actually researched it? I told you, cognitive dissonance isn't my style. If a theory challenges my worldview, I investigate. And your conclusion? Implementation is complex but not impossible. Shifting from shareholder primacy to stakeholder balance would require fundamental restructuring of corporate governance, compensation incentives, and success metrics. But it's feasible. Theoretically. Alexander sipped his wine. Practically, it would meet significant resistance, particularly from those with vested interests in the current system. Like you, Maya pointed out. Like me, he agreed. Though I'm finding my vested interests more negotiable than I expected. Their conversation paused as Florrie delivered handmade pasta with a sauce so aromatic it made Alexander's mouth water involuntarily. When she departed, Maya studied him thoughtfully. Why are you really here, Alexander? In this neighborhood, in this restaurant, with me? I keep asking myself what someone like you wants from someone like me. Alexander considered several responses: charm, deflection, partial truth. Instead, he chose honesty. I'm here because you're the first person in years who doesn't care about what I can do for them. You challenge me intellectually and don't defer to my position. He twirled pasta around his fork. And if I'm being completely honest, I find that refreshing, maybe even attractive. Maya looked skeptical. So this is about novelty? The billionaire slumming it for an authentic experience? You asked for honesty, not flattery. Fair enough. She nodded, seemingly appreciating his directness. Though I'm still not convinced this isn't some kind of sociological experiment for you. And I'm not convinced your interest is purely academic, despite your objections to everything I represent. Maya's cheeks flushed slightly. Touché. The tension between them shifted, becoming something else, a mutual recognition of attraction despite their fundamental differences. "Tell me something real," Maya challenged. "Something the Forbes profile doesn't cover." Alexander considered the request. "I hate board meetings. 12 people pretending to care about long-term strategic vision when all they want is next quarter's dividends. I built the company to create something lasting, something innovative. Most days it feels like I'm just managing wealth rather than creating value." The admission surprised him as much as it seemed to surprise her. "That's not what I expected," Maya said softly. "Your turn," he prompted. "Something real." She traced the rim of her wineglass. "I'm terrified of failing. My parents sacrificed everything for my education. Some days I think my research is just tilting at windmills, that the system is too entrenched to ever change. Yet you continue. What choice is there? Surrender to inevitable ecological collapse and widening inequality? Most people do exactly that. They adapt to the world as it is rather than trying to reshape it. Is that what you've done? Adapted rather than reshaped? The question struck uncomfortably close to a truth Alexander rarely acknowledged. Initially, I wanted to revolutionize the tech industry, create truly innovative products that improved lives. Somewhere along the way, growth became the objective rather than the byproduct. "It's not too late to redirect," Maya said, leaning forward. "You have resources and influence most changemakers can only dream about." Before Alexander could respond, their conversation was interrupted by a commotion at the front of the restaurant. A man in an expensive suit was arguing loudly with Nonna Flori. "Reservation? We no take reservations?" Flori was saying, hands on her hips. "You wait like everyone else." "Do you know who I am?" the man demanded. "Yes. Rude man who doesn't understand how restaurant works." Maya grimaced. "That's Calvin Reynolds, real estate developer who's been trying to buy this building for years. Wants to demolish it for luxury condos." Alexander recognized the name. Reynolds Development was a mid-tier player known for aggressive gentrification projects in emerging neighborhoods. "I take it Nonna isn't selling?" "This restaurant is her life. But the neighboring businesses have sold, and the pressure increases daily." Reynolds spotted them, his eyes narrowing as he recognized Maya. He pushed past Flori and approached their table. "Ms. Russo," he greeted with false warmth. "Still advising Nonna to cling to a failing business model? This neighborhood is evolving. She could take the buyout and retire comfortably." "This neighborhood is a community, not an investment opportunity," Maya replied evenly. "And Flori's is its heart." Reynolds's gaze shifted to Alexander, his expression changing as recognition dawned. "Mr. Blackwood, I didn't expect to see you here." Alexander assessed the situation instantly. Reynolds clearly knew him, which risked exposing his wealth and status to Maya. However, the developer's presence offered an opportunity to demonstrate values Maya would respect. "Reynolds," he acknowledged coolly. "I don't believe we've been formally introduced." "Calvin Reynolds, Reynolds Development." He extended his hand, which Alexander deliberately didn't take. "We have mutual connections in the Manhattan real estate circle. Your penthouse in Blackwood Tower is legendary." Maya's gaze snapped to Alexander, her expression hardening at the confirmation of his wealth. "Perhaps you could explain why you're interrupting our dinner," Alexander said, his tone carrying the subtle authority that typically silenced boardrooms. Reynolds faltered. "Just saying hello? Always good to connect with fellow businessmen. I'd prefer to finish my meal, and I'd suggest respecting Nonna Flori's policies in her establishment." Reynolds retreated, clearly unwilling to antagonize someone of Alexander's stature. When he was gone, Maya stared at Alexander with renewed suspicion. "Penthouse in Blackwood Tower?" she questioned. "Just how wealthy are you?" Alexander knew the moment of truth had arrived sooner than anticipated. "Wealthy enough that it creates an immediate barrier between me and most people." "That's not an answer. Would knowing an exact number change anything about our conversation tonight?" Maya struggled visibly. It contextualizes everything. Are you here because you're genuinely interested, or am I some kind of poverty tourism experience? That's not fair, isn't it? You clearly downplayed your status. Why? Alexander chose his words carefully. Because I wanted you to see me, not my net worth. Their dinner arrived, osso buco that smelled divine, but the mood had shifted. Maya picked at her food, her earlier openness replaced by guarded observation. For what it's worth, Alexander said quietly, tonight was never about slumming or novelty. The conversation we're having, about economic models, corporate responsibility, personal values, matters to me. Maya studied him, conflict evident in her expression. I don't know what to believe anymore. Believe this moment. Two people sharing exceptional food, challenging each other's perspectives, finding unexpected common ground. Slowly, Maya's posture relaxed. The food is exceptional, she conceded with a small smile. They finished their meal in an uncertain truce, the earlier intimacy partially restored but tempered by Maya's newfound awareness of just how vast the gap between their worlds truly was. As they prepared to leave, Nonna Flori approached with a package. Tiramisu to take home. Good for sharing, good for thinking. She patted Alexander's cheek again. You come back. Still too skinny. Outside the restaurant, they stood in awkward silence. The night air was cool, the street quiet except for distant traffic. Thank you for dinner, Maya said finally. It was illuminating. Will I see you again? Alexander asked, surprised by how much her answer mattered. Maya hesitated. I need time to process all of this. Good night, Alexander. As he watched her walk away, Alexander realized two troubling facts simultaneously. The wager was now the furthest thing from his mind, and for the first time in his adult life, he cared deeply about someone else's opinion of him. Alexander paced his penthouse, the city lights sprawling beneath him like a circuit board of human activity. He hadn't felt this unsettled in years. Maya's parting expression, a mixture of disappointment and wariness, had followed him home, an unwelcome companion to his thoughts. He poured himself 2 fingers of 30-year-old scotch, then set it aside untouched. The recording device for his daily update to Lucas sat on his desk, blinking expectantly. What could he possibly say? That he was genuinely affected by a woman whose entire world view opposed his own? That he felt ashamed of his wealth for the first time in his life? Day 3, he finally began. Dinner at an authentic Italian restaurant in Queens. The evening progressed well initially, with substantive conversation about economic models and personal motivations. However, a complication arose when Calvin Reynolds recognized me, revealing my status to Maya before I was prepared to address it. Alexander paused, staring at the recording device. The standard swagger that typically colored his communications with Lucas felt false now. The timeline is becoming problematic, he continued more honestly. Maya is intelligent, perceptive, and principled. She's suspicious of my motives, which is entirely reasonable given the gulf between our circumstances. More troublingly, I find myself increasingly uncomfortable with the wager's premise. He stopped the recording, deleted it, and started again. Day 3. Dinner was a mixed success. Maya's guard is lowering, though Reynolds' interference temporarily disrupted progress. I remain confident in achieving the objective within the established time frame. The words felt hollow, performative. Alexander sent the recording anyway, unable to articulate the confusion he felt even to himself. He turned to his laptop and pulled up Blackwood Industries' latest acquisition proposal, a manufacturing facility in Malaysia where labor costs were significantly lower than their current Chinese operations. The report highlighted projected savings of $42 million annually. 6 hours ago, he would have approved it without hesitation. Now he found himself scrolling to the section on working conditions, noticing what was conspicuously absent from the analysis: living wages, environmental impact, community investment. Maya's voice echoed in his mind. Your company is a case study in how modern capitalism concentrates resources. Alexander closed the laptop and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. For the first time, he viewed his empire from an outsider's perspective, Maya's perspective. What would she see in this penthouse? Not achievement, but excess. Not security, but hoarding. Not success, but imbalance. His phone chimed with a text from Lucas. Getting worried you might actually lose this bet? The great Alexander Blackwood, defeated by a delivery girl with principles? The message irritated him more than it should have. Maya wasn't a delivery girl. She was a brilliant, dedicated woman pursuing meaningful work against substantial odds. Reducing her to her temporary job felt disrespectful. That thought stopped him cold. Since when did Alexander Blackwood concern himself with respecting the dignity of service workers? Since Maya, apparently. He texted back simply, "Progress continues. Focus on having 100 million ready to transfer." But as he prepared for bed, Alexander couldn't escape the nagging sense that he was already losing something more valuable than money. Across the city, Maya sat cross-legged on her couch, recounting the evening to Zoe, who listened with growing incredulity. Wait, he's not just rich, he's Alexander Blackwood rich? As in, owns the building named after him rich? Apparently. Maya hugged a pillow to her chest, and he deliberately downplayed it. Can you blame him? Would you have agreed to coffee if he'd arrived in a Bentley flashing his black card? That's not the point. Isn't it? You've spent years criticizing people like him in abstract terms. Now there's an actual human attached to the wealth, and it complicates your neat theoretical framework. Maya frowned. There's nothing neat about economic inequality. The fact that he can casually drop thousands on dinner while Nona Flori fights to keep her restaurant. Did he drop thousands on dinner? Zoe interrupted. Well, no, we ate at Flori's. But he could have. But he didn't. He came to your turf, ate at your favorite local restaurant, and had substantive conversations about your research. Zoe raised an eyebrow. Sounds terribly exploitative. You're missing the point. He concealed his true identity. Did he? Or did he just not lead with, "Hi, I'm a billionaire," because he knew you'd immediately write him off? Maya opened her mouth to object, then closed it again. Her friend's logic was frustratingly sound. Look, Zoe continued more gently, I'm not saying you should ignore the wealth gap. It's real, and it matters. But maybe judge the individual on his actions, not just his bank account. His actions created that bank account. And his actions brought him to Flori's to understand your perspective. Zoe squeezed Maya's arm. Just consider the possibility that people, even obscenely wealthy people, can surprise you. After Zoe went to bed, Maya opened her laptop to work on her thesis. Instead, she found herself searching for more information about Alexander Blackwood. The official narrative was familiar. Orphaned at 12, raised by his stern grandfather, built Blackwood Industries from a small tech startup into a global conglomerate. But she also found articles detailing innovation grants for minority entrepreneurs, significant donations to education initiatives, a pandemic response that kept all employees on payroll with full benefits despite plummeting revenues. These complexities didn't negate her critiques of the system that allowed such wealth concentration, but they did suggest Alexander wasn't merely a one-dimensional villain in her economic morality play. Maya closed her laptop, more confused than ever. The man she'd had dinner with, thoughtful, engaged, surprisingly vulnerable at times, didn't align with her preconception of a billionaire industrialist. Yet the vast gulf between their circumstances remained an immutable fact. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Thank you for tonight. The conversation, the food, and especially the company were exceptional. Alexander. She stared at the message, unsure how to respond or whether to respond at all. After several attempts at drafting replies, she finally sent, "How did you get my number?" His response came immediately. "Your website has your contact information." I hope that's not overstepping. Maya grimaced. Of course, he'd researched her. It's fine. And dinner was, interesting. Interesting good or interesting bad? Complicated. I excel at complicated. Give me another chance to prove it. Central Park, Saturday afternoon. There's an economic justice rally I thought you might want to attend. Maya blinked at the screen in surprise. Alexander Blackwood was inviting her to an economic justice rally? Are you serious? She texted back. Entirely. Consider it field research. You can observe the protesters, and I can observe you observing them. Despite herself, Maya smiled. You're very strange for a billionaire. I prefer uniquely compelling. Saturday, 2 p.m. Meet at the Columbus Circle entrance, and this is not a date. Of course not. It's academic field research. Maya set her phone down, fighting the warmth spreading through her chest. This was dangerous territory, developing feelings for someone whose very existence represented systemic problems she'd dedicated her life to addressing. Yet she couldn't deny the connection forming between them, inconvenient and unexpected as it was. The following morning, Maya's precarious financial reality reasserted itself harshly. Her laptop, essential for her research, classes, and online work, died completely, the screen going black mid-paragraph on her thesis. No amount of troubleshooting revived it. The repair shop confirmed her fears. The motherboard was fried. A replacement would cost more than a new machine, and both options exceeded her meager savings, especially with tuition due. Outside the shop, Maya leaned against the wall, fighting tears of frustration. 3 years of research, drafts of her thesis, work documents, all trapped on a machine she couldn't afford to fix or replace. Her professor had granted a 2-week extension on her thesis chapter, but without a computer, even that seemed impossible. The library computers had limited availability and 2-hour time restrictions. As she calculated which bill she could postpone to afford a basic replacement, her phone rang with an unknown number. Ms. Russo? This is Dean Harrison's office at Columbia. We're pleased to inform you that you've been selected for the Economic Innovation Fellowship. It includes a stipend and research equipment, including a new laptop which is available for immediate pickup. Maya blinked in confusion. There must be a mistake. I didn't apply for that fellowship. An anonymous donor established it recently, and the faculty recommended you based on your research focus. The paperwork will explain everything. Shall we expect you this afternoon? Dazed, Maya agreed and ended the call. An anonymous donor with impeccable timing? It seemed too coincidental. Her suspicion was confirmed when she arrived at the administration office. The new laptop was top of the line, far exceeding standard university equipment. The attached letter referenced her specific research areas with familiar language she'd used with only one person recently, Alexander. Her initial reaction was indignation. How dare he swoop in with his millions to rescue her? It felt patronizing, a demonstration of the very power imbalance she critiqued in her work. Yet as she set up the laptop in her apartment, more complicated feelings emerged. The machine would genuinely advance her research, potentially helping her develop models that challenged the very system that had enriched Alexander. There was a certain ironic justice in that. More troublingly, the gesture revealed attentiveness she hadn't expected. Alexander had listened to her academic goals, understood their importance to her, and found a way to support them that maintained her dignity, anonymous, merit-based, institutionally validated. Maya sent a text before she could reconsider. Was the Economic Innovation Fellowship you're doing? No response came for nearly an hour. Finally, I may have mentioned your research to some contacts in Columbia's economics department. The fellowship's selection committee made their own decision based on merit. You can't just throw money at problems, Alexander. I didn't. I connected resources to talent. Specifically, your talent. The committee recognized your work's value independently. Maya couldn't decide if she was touched or troubled. Why? His response was simple. Because your work matters. And because I'm still hoping to see you Saturday." Against her better judgment, Maya found herself smiling. 2 p.m. Don't be late. She set the phone down, the conflict within her intensifying. Her rational mind insisted that Alexander Blackwood represented everything wrong with wealth distribution. Her heart whispered that perhaps individuals were more complex than the systems they inhabited. Saturday would bring clarity, she hoped. But as Maya returned to her thesis, now flowing smoothly on her new laptop, she wondered if clarity was really what she wanted. Saturday arrived with perfect early autumn weather, crisp air, golden sunlight, and trees beginning their transformation into fiery colors. Alexander arrived at Columbus Circle 30 minutes early, restless with anticipation. He'd dressed with careful consideration, dark jeans, a plain navy sweater over a button-down, and, after much deliberation, his least expensive watch. Nothing that screamed wealth, yet nothing that felt like a costume. He'd spent the morning reviewing the rally's organizers and their demands. Increased taxes on the ultra-wealthy corporate accountability legislation, expanded social safety nets, essentially policies that would directly impact his bottom line. 2 weeks ago, he would have dismissed these demands as economically unfeasible socialism. Now, he found himself considering their practical implementation rather than rejecting them outright. The past 2 days had been filled with unexpected self-reflection. Alexander had postponed the Malaysian acquisition, requesting additional analysis of labor conditions and environmental impact. He'd initiated conversations with his executive team about stakeholder-focused metrics alongside shareholder returns. Small steps, perhaps performative ones, but they felt necessary somehow. Lucas had called yesterday, concerned about the terse updates and Alexander's unusual business decisions. "Are you actually falling for this girl?" he'd asked incredulously. "I'm simply seeing my business through fresh perspectives," Alexander had deflected. "Bull, you've never questioned profit maximization in your life. This has to be strategic. Gaining her trust to win the bet?" Alexander had ended the call abruptly, uncomfortable with Lucas's assessment yet unable to articulate why. The wager now felt juvenile, reductive. The need to impress Maya, to genuinely impress her, not just seduce her, stemmed from something deeper than competitive pride. "You came." Alexander turned to find Maya approaching, looking effortlessly beautiful in jeans, boots, and a green jacket. Her curls were contained beneath a knit beanie, and she carried a handmade sign reading, "People over profit." "I said I would." He smiled, surprising himself with his genuine happiness at seeing her. "Nice sign." "Thanks. I wasn't sure you'd actually show up for an event explicitly criticizing people exactly like you." Consider it immersion education. Besides, criticism implies the possibility of improvement. Maya's expression softened. "That's unexpectedly open-minded. I'm learning that many of my certainties deserve reconsideration." He gestured toward the growing crowd. "Shall we?" They joined the flow of protesters moving toward the rally's staging area. Alexander observed everything with keen interest: the diversity of participants, the creativity of their signs, the underlying organization of what appeared chaotic. This wasn't the disorderly mob that financial news portrayed. These were ordinary people united by concern for systemic problems. Maya greeted several fellow protesters, introducing Alexander simply as a friend interested in learning more. No one recognized him without his usual context of boardrooms and benefits. "So, what do you think so far?" Maya asked as they found a spot near the stage. "It's more organized than media coverage suggests, and the demands are less radical than portrayed. Many are policy standards in other developed nations." She studied him with frank surprise. "Have you been researching economic justice?" "Know thy enemy?" He quoted her with a small smile. "Actually, yes. I've been reading the sources cited in your thesis proposal." "You found my thesis proposal?" "It's published on Columbia's research portal. Your analysis of Nordic mixed economic models is particularly compelling, though I question the transferability to larger, more diverse economies. Before Maya could respond, the speakers began. Alexander listened attentively as activists, economists, and community organizers presented data on wealth inequality, corporate tax avoidance, and the human cost of prioritizing profit above all else. One speaker, a former Wall Street executive turned whistleblower, specifically named Blackwood Industries among corporations exploiting tax loopholes while hoarding unprecedented wealth. Alexander tensed, aware of Maya watching him closely. "He's not wrong," Alexander admitted quietly. "Our effective tax rate last year was 4.3% despite record profits. Perfectly legal, but ethically questionable." Maya's expression was unreadable. Most billionaires would defend that practice vigorously. "I'm trying honesty instead. How's it working?" Her lips quirked. "It's disarming." When the formal speeches concluded, they joined a workshop circle discussing practical actions. Alexander mostly listened, but occasionally offered insights that only someone with intimate knowledge of corporate structures could provide. "The challenge," he noted during a discussion about corporate accountability, "is that multinational structures intentionally obscure responsibility. To create real change, you need both external pressure and internal champions willing to absorb short-term profit reductions for long-term sustainability." A gray-haired woman across the circle nodded. "Exactly why we need allies in those executive suites. Are you in corporate leadership?" "Consulting," Alexander replied smoothly. "But yes, I see these dynamics firsthand." Maya shot him a look that mingled amusement with something like respect. As the afternoon progressed, they drifted through various activities, signing petitions, joining discussion groups, examining resource tables. Alexander found himself genuinely engaged, particularly when conversations moved beyond moral outrage into practical solutions. "You're surprisingly knowledgeable about financial regulation," observed a former SEC lawyer who'd been discussing enforcement challenges. "I follow the markets closely," Alexander replied. "He's being modest," Maya interjected. "Alexander understands the system because he's part of it, which makes his perspective particularly valuable." The lawyer nodded. "We need more insiders willing to acknowledge the problems. Change happens from both outside and within." As they walked away, Alexander glanced at Maya. That was unexpected support. She shrugged. "Your insights were valuable. I can acknowledge that while still criticizing the system that gives you disproportionate influence." "Nuance? From an activist? How refreshing," he teased. "Just because I have strong principles doesn't mean I can't recognize complexity." She bumped his shoulder lightly. "People contain multitudes, remember?" The casual contact sent a disproportionate warmth through him. Alexander was accustomed to calculated touches in social settings. Air kisses, strategic handshakes, the occasional seduction. This friendly gesture felt more intimate than any of those. They stopped at a booth collecting signatures for a wealth tax proposal. The young man behind the table handed Maya a clipboard, then turned to Alexander. "How about you, man? Support making billionaires pay their fair share?" Alexander hesitated only briefly before taking the clipboard. Defining fair share is the challenge, but the current system certainly needs adjustment. As he signed, using only his first name, Maya watched with an expression he couldn't quite interpret. "What?" he asked as they walked away. "You just signed a petition that would cost you personally billions if implemented." "Perhaps," he shrugged, "or perhaps those billions could create more value allocated differently." Maya stopped walking. "Who are you, and what have you done with Alexander Blackwood?" "Is it so hard to believe I might evolve my thinking?" "In a week?" "Yes." "You underestimate your influence." The words emerged with more sincerity than he'd intended. Maya studied him, searching for deception and finding none. "I don't know what to make of you anymore." "That makes two of us." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Alexander felt a nearly overwhelming urge to kiss her, right there amid protest signs and petition clipboards. The incongruity of the setting made the impulse all the more powerful. Instead, he gestured toward a nearby food truck. Hungry? They shared falafel sandwiches on a park bench, their conversation shifting to lighter topics: favorite books, travel experiences, childhood memories. Alexander found himself sharing stories he rarely discussed. Summers with his grandfather in Maine, his first failed entrepreneurial venture at 16, his brief, rebellious interest in philosophy before economics captured his attention. Maya reciprocated with tales of growing up in Queens, her parents' small acts of sacrifice and dignity, weekend cooking lessons with Nonna Flori, the community library that became her sanctuary. "I've been meaning to thank you," she said finally, crumpling her sandwich wrapper, "for the fellowship. It was thoughtful." "You're welcome, though I maintain the committee selected you on merit." "Right. The anonymous donor just happened to establish it exactly when my laptop died. Fortunate timing." Maya's skeptical smile suggested she wasn't fooled but had decided to accept the gesture's spirit. "Why did you really invite me here today?" Alexander considered several answers before settling on the truth. "Because I wanted to understand your world better. Because these issues clearly matter to you. Because I'm starting to think they should matter to me too." "And has it worked? Do you understand better?" "I understand that righteous anger alone doesn't create change, that solutions require engagement from all sides, that behind statistics are real human experiences." He met her gaze directly. "And I understand why someone as brilliant as you dedicates herself to these causes." Maya looked away, uncharacteristically flustered. "It's getting late. Have dinner with me. Not as field research or academic debate. Just dinner. Alexander. Just Maya and Alexander. No billionaire, no activist, two people who enjoy each other's company." She hesitated, visibly conflicted. "I have plans with Zoe tonight. Tomorrow, then. I know a place in the village that sources everything locally, pays living wages, and still manages exceptional food." Trying to appeal to my ethical consumer sensibilities? A small smile played at her lips. "Is it working?" "Maybe." Maya stood. "Tomorrow. Text me the details." As they prepared to part ways at the subway entrance, an awkward moment arose, a hesitation where neither knew the appropriate goodbye. A handshake seemed too formal, a hug too presumptuous, a kiss unthinkable. "Thank you for today," Alexander said finally. "It was genuinely enlightening." "You surprised me," Maya admitted. "I expected performative interest at best. Have I earned a review upgrade from performative to genuine?" "You're on probationary genuine status." Her smile softened the assessment. "Subject to ongoing evaluation. I look forward to the continued assessment." After she disappeared down the subway stairs, Alexander remained standing there, overwhelmed by unfamiliar emotions. He'd attended the rally as a strategic step toward winning Maya over. He'd left with his own perspectives fundamentally shifted. That evening, when recording his update for Lucas, Alexander found himself at a loss. How could he possibly convey the significance of watching Maya passionately advocate for her beliefs? The unexpected respect he felt witnessing her intellectual framework applied to real-world problems? The simple joy of sharing falafel on a park bench, talking about everything and nothing? Day 5, he finally recorded. Rally attendance successful, continuing to make progress. Dinner scheduled for tomorrow evening. The deliberately vague update would irritate Lucas, but Alexander no longer cared. Something more important than a juvenile wager was developing, something he wasn't prepared to trivialize with strategic assessments and conquest updates. For the first time in his adult life, Alexander Blackwood was falling for someone without calculating the return on emotional investment. Sunday morning found Alexander in his office, a rare occurrence on weekends. The wall of windows offered Manhattan's skyline as backdrop while he reviewed documents that had never previously troubled him. Employee compensation reports, environmental impact assessments, community displacement statistics from recent developments. His executive team had been baffled by his sudden interest in these metrics. His chief operating officer had asked point-blank if there was a PR crisis brewing that required preemptive damage control. No crisis, Alexander had assured him, just a more comprehensive understanding of our operations. The truth was more complicated. After yesterday's rally, Alexander couldn't unsee the human implications behind Blackwood Industries' clinical financial decisions. Each cost-cutting measure, tax strategy, and resource allocation affected real people like Maya, her neighbors, Nonna Flori. He'd spent the morning drafting a proposal for his board, a comprehensive stakeholder impact analysis framework that would evaluate business decisions beyond shareholder returns. It would be a hard sell. The board valued Alexander's leadership precisely because he delivered consistent growth and profitability. This apparent philosophical shift would raise eyebrows if not outright resistance. Yet Alexander found himself energized by the challenge. For years, he'd dominated his industry through competitive drive and strategic brilliance. What if he applied those same qualities toward redefining success itself? His phone rang. Lucas. "Your last update was suspiciously thin," his friend began without preamble. "I'm starting to worry you've gone native with the social justice warriors." Alexander sighed. "I'm not going native. I'm having conversations with an intelligent woman about perspectives I hadn't previously considered." "Right. You're telling me that in 5 days this delivery girl has completely revamped your business philosophy? The Alexander Blackwood I know doesn't change course for anyone." "Maybe that's the problem," Alexander replied, surprising himself with the admission. "And stop calling her delivery girl. Her name is Maya, and she's more accomplished than most of our Harvard classmates." A weighted pause followed. "You're actually serious about her?" "I'm serious about reassessing assumptions I've never questioned. Maya happens to be the catalyst." "And the bet?" Alexander stared out at the city, the wager feeling increasingly distasteful. "Still in progress." 2 days left, Lucas reminded him. "Unless you're ready to concede and transfer $100 million to her choice of charity." "That won't be necessary." Alexander ended the call, discomfort settling in his chest. The bet had begun as an arrogant challenge, fueled by his certainty that anyone could be won over with the right approach. Now it felt like a betrayal of the genuine connection forming between them. How could he possibly tell Maya that their first meeting had been prompted by a wager about his ability to make her date him? Alexander pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on their dinner tonight. He'd selected Harvest, a restaurant known for ethical sourcing, fair labor practices, and exceptional cuisine. The perfect balance of values and experience. As evening approached, he found himself uncharacteristically nervous. His usual confidence in social situations had evaporated, replaced by genuine concern about Maya's impression of him. He changed outfits twice, something he hadn't done since his teens, finally settling on a charcoal sweater and dark jeans that walked the line between casual and refined. Harvest occupied a converted industrial space in the West Village, its brick walls and reclaimed wood tables creating warmth without pretension. Alexander arrived early, selecting a corner table that offered some privacy while still capturing the restaurant's convivial atmosphere. When Maya entered, his breath caught. She wore a simple burgundy dress that complemented her olive skin, her unruly curls partially tamed into a loose updo. She looked beautiful in a way that required no artifice, a natural elegance that outshone the polished socialites who typically populated his world. "You look stunning," he said as she joined him. "Thank you." A faint blush colored her cheeks. "This place is lovely. Actually walking their ethical talk from what I've read." "I did my research," Alexander smiled. The owner pioneered the living wage model in New York restaurants, all ingredients sourced within 200 miles, and they run a culinary training program for formerly incarcerated individuals. Impressive homework. Maya settled into her chair, studying him with curious eyes. You've been busy since yesterday. How so? Online business publications are buzzing about Blackwood Industries' apparent shift toward stakeholder capitalism. Something about new assessment frameworks for corporate decisions? Alexander raised an eyebrow. You follow business publications? Know thy enemy, she reminded him with a small smile. Plus, I was curious whether our conversations were just theoretical exercises for you. They're not, he said simply. Your perspectives have been clarifying. Clarifying enough to risk shareholder backlash? The articles suggest your board is concerned. They'll adapt, or I'll replace them. The declaration wasn't arrogant, just matter of fact. The business case for stakeholder capitalism is stronger than most realize. Long-term sustainability, consumer loyalty, employee retention, community goodwill, these create durable value beyond quarterly returns. Maya studied him over her menu. You're framing ethical business as profitable business. Is that disappointing? Would you prefer moral enlightenment as my motivation? I prefer honesty, she replied thoughtfully. And honestly, systemic change requires transforming incentive structures, not just individual conversions. If you can demonstrate that ethical practices create sustainable value, you'll influence more businesses than any moral appeal. Her pragmatism surprised him. You're more practical than your activism suggests. Idealism sets the destination. Pragmatism builds the road. Maya set down her menu. But enough business talk. You promised dinner as just two people enjoying each other's company. So I did. Alexander felt tension release he hadn't realized he was carrying. What shall we discuss instead? Books, films, your inexplicable preference for the Yankees over the Mets? Maya laughed, a genuine, unguarded sound that affected Alexander more deeply than he expected. The Mets are perpetual heartbreakers. I have enough challenges without emotionally investing in guaranteed disappointment. They ordered, Maya selecting the seasonal vegetable risotto, Alexander the sustainably caught halibut, and fell into easy conversation that wandered from childhood memories to favorite travel destinations to heated debates about literature. He found himself sharing stories he rarely recounted. His grandfather teaching him to sail during stormy Maine summers, the teacher who recognized his business acumen when he organized a sophisticated trading system for lunch items, his secret love of classical poetry that his business associates would mock mercilessly. In turn, Maya described growing up in a household where money was perpetually tight but creativity abundant. Her father crafting elaborate furniture from discarded materials, her mother transforming fabric scraps into breathtaking quilts, weekends spent in museums and libraries because they were free yet offered infinite worlds. They sound remarkable, Alexander said softly. They would be incredibly proud of what you've accomplished. Sometimes I wonder, Maya admitted, vulnerability softening her features. My mother wanted me to find security, not spend my 20s juggling multiple jobs to pursue an academic career critiquing the economic system. I think they'd recognize you're building something more valuable than mere security. You're creating purpose. Their eyes held across the table, a moment of connection that transcended their disparate backgrounds. The waiter's arrival with their entrees broke the spell, but something had shifted between them, a deepening that both recognized but neither acknowledged directly. As they shared dessert, a locally sourced apple tart with honey lavender ice cream, Maya asked the question Alexander had been dreading. Why me, Alexander? Of all the sophisticated, accomplished women in your social circle, why pursue a chronically broke graduate student who challenges everything you've built? Alexander considered deflection, then chose honesty. Because you see me. Not my wealth, not my power, but me. You challenge me without agenda. You've made me question assumptions I've held my entire adult life. He paused, searching for words. With you, I'm not performing a role or meeting expectations. I'm just discovering who I might be beyond what I've achieved." Maya's expression softened. "That's not the answer I expected." "What did you expect?" "Something about enjoying the novelty, or being attracted to my fearless truth-telling, or slumming it as an anthropological experiment. All less vulnerable than the truth," Alexander acknowledged with a rueful smile. "And the truth is that I find myself thinking about you constantly, that our conversations have shifted how I view my entire life's work, that despite our fundamentally different circumstances, you understand me in ways people I've known for decades never have." The admission hung between them, more intimate than any physical gesture could have been. Maya looked down at their half-eaten dessert, then back to his eyes. "This is complicated," she said finally. "I excel at complicated," he reminded her. "Alexander, She hesitated. "I can't deny I'm drawn to you, but I've built my entire academic and personal identity around critiquing the concentration of wealth and power that you represent. How do I reconcile that? Perhaps the same way I'm reconciling my business principles with perspectives I'd previously dismissed." He reached across the table, tentatively taking her hand. "By acknowledging complexity, by seeing individuals beyond systems, by allowing space for evolution." Maya didn't withdraw her hand. "That's a very reasonable answer from someone who stands to lose nothing in the reconciliation." "On the contrary," Alexander said quietly, "I stand to lose certainties I've relied on my entire life. The belief that wealth equals worth, that maximizing profit justifies any business decision, that emotional detachment ensures success." Her fingers curled slightly around his. "And if those beliefs need losing, then perhaps what replaces them will prove more valuable." The moment stretched between them, possibilities unfolding in the silence. Finally, Maya's phone buzzed, breaking the connection. She reluctantly checked the screen. "My roommate. There's an emergency with our apartment, something about a burst pipe." "Let me get the check," Alexander signaled the waiter. "I'll have my driver take you home." "That's not necessary." "It's pouring rain and you need to get home quickly, please," she acquiesced with a nod. Outside, his driver held an umbrella as they rushed to the waiting car. The interior was luxurious but understated. Leather seats, subtle lighting, privacy partition. Maya took it all in with a raised eyebrow. "More comfortable than the subway," she admitted. As the car moved through rain-slicked streets, Alexander found himself acutely aware of her presence beside him, the subtle scent of her perfume, the way the passing streetlights illuminated her profile. The urge to kiss her was nearly overwhelming, but he restrained himself. This fragile connection couldn't withstand presumption. When they reached her building, he instructed the driver to wait. "Thank you for tonight," Maya said softly. "For the conversation, for listening, for seeing me too. The pleasure was entirely mine." She hesitated, then leaned forward and pressed a gentle kiss to his cheek, a whisper of contact that affected him more profoundly than any passionate embrace from his past. "Good night, Alexander." He watched her rush through the rain to her building entrance, turning once to offer a small wave before disappearing inside. Alexander touched his cheek where her lips had brushed his skin, a gesture so simple yet more meaningful than he could have imagined. The sophisticated billionaire who had confidently wagered he could make any woman date him now found himself hoping desperately that one particular woman might give him a chance, not because he'd strategically maneuvered her, but because she genuinely saw something in him worth knowing. Maya surveyed the disaster that was her apartment with growing despair. The burst pipe had flooded the entire bathroom and most of the living room before maintenance had managed to shut off the water. Now, at nearly midnight, she and Zoe were moving furniture, salvaging belongings, and mopping furiously. "At least the bedrooms are mostly dry," Zoe said, wringing out another towel. "Small mercies." My thesis notes, Maya moaned, fishing soggy papers from a puddle. And the bookshelf. Half my research collection is waterlogged. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. Made it home safely? Been thinking about you? She hesitated, then responded honestly, home to chaos. Pipe burst worse than expected, trying to salvage what we can. His response came immediately. Do you need help? I can come. It's midnight. I'm aware of the time. I have resources that could be useful. Maya looked around the sodden apartment. Their landlord had promised a cleanup crew tomorrow afternoon. Until then, they were on their own with mops, buckets, and rapidly diminishing stamina. Actually, yes, if you're serious. 20 minutes later, a knock at the door revealed not just Alexander, but a team of professionals equipped with industrial wet vacuums, dehumidifiers, and restoration equipment. He'd changed from his dinner attire into jeans and a simple black sweater, looking jarringly out of place in her modest apartment building. You called in a professional restoration company at midnight? Maya asked, incredulous. One of my buildings had a similar issue last year. They're very effective. Alexander surveyed the damage. I hope you don't mind, but efficiency seemed more important than consulting about every detail. Maya should have been offended by his high-handedness. Instead, she felt overwhelming relief as the crew immediately began extracting water and assessing damage. Thank you, she said quietly. Your books and papers were your biggest concern? He asked. Maya nodded, leading him to her waterlogged collection. Alexander examined them with genuine concern, then made a phone call. Minutes later, another specialist arrived with equipment specifically for document and book restoration. We'll freeze-dry the most damaged volumes to prevent mold, then restore them properly, the technician explained. Which documents are highest priority? Maya identified her research materials, thesis drafts, and most precious books, marveling at the efficiency with which the team cataloged and carefully packed everything. Alexander moved through her apartment with surprising sensitivity, never commenting on its modest size or worn furnishings. Instead, he rolled up his sleeves and helped move furniture, working alongside the professionals he'd summoned. Zoe pulled Maya into the kitchen under the pretense of making coffee. So, billionaire boyfriend comes to the rescue with a midnight restoration team, she whispered. That's some serious knight in shining armor energy. He's not my boyfriend, Maya objected automatically. He's in our living room at 1 a.m. moving furniture in designer jeans that probably cost more than our rent. Whatever he is, it's not nothing. Maya couldn't argue with that assessment. Watching Alexander, who probably had staff to make his bed and iron his socks, hauling waterlogged books and helping position dehumidifiers, challenged her preconceptions yet again. When she brought him coffee, their fingers brushed briefly. The contact sent an unexpected current through her, heightened by the intimacy of him being in her personal space. Your home is lovely, Alexander said, accepting the mug. It feels lived in, personal. Maya glanced around at their mismatched furniture, the flea market finds, the overflowing bookshelves. It's nothing like what you're used to. That's precisely why it feels like a home rather than a showcase. He gestured toward a wall of photos. Maya with her parents, with Nonna Flori, with Zoe. Your life is visible here. My penthouse could belong to anyone with sufficient funds. The observation held surprising vulnerability. Maya found herself wanting to see his space, to understand the environment he'd created for himself beyond the corporate persona. By 3 a.m., the restoration team had worked miracles. The standing water was gone, dehumidifiers hummed efficiently, and the most damaged items had been carefully packed for specialized restoration. The team leader assured them the apartment would be habitable, though drying would continue for days. They'll return tomorrow to continue the process, Alexander explained as the crew packed up. Your books and documents should be restored within a week. I don't know how to thank you, Maya said. You could have breakfast with me, he suggested with a tired smile. I know a place that opens at 6 a.m. and makes exceptional brioche. Despite her exhaustion, Maya found herself nodding. Breakfast would be nice. After Alexander left, promising to return in 3 hours, Zoe gave Maya a significant look. You realize you're dating him, right? Dinner, rescue mission, breakfast. These are relationship milestones. It's complicated, Maya sighed, collapsing onto their now dry sofa. Only because you're making it complicated. The man clearly cares about you, not as a project or novelty, but genuinely. He represents everything I critique in my work. No, the system represents what you critique. He's a person making choices within that system, and from what I've seen tonight, making increasingly conscious ones. Maya pondered her friend's distinction as she showered and changed clothes. She'd built her academic identity around analyzing systemic inequalities, yet here was someone who embodied that system's benefits, choosing to use his resources thoughtfully, responsively. Perhaps Zoe was right. The distinction between individuals and systems mattered. Alexander hadn't created global capitalism, even if he'd excelled within it, and he seemed genuinely receptive to reconsidering his role. When he returned at 6 a.m., freshly showered and somehow looking unreasonably handsome despite the sleepless night, Maya felt a flutter of anticipation that had nothing to do with academic interest. Across town, Lucas was already at his desk, reviewing quarterly projections when his assistant announced a visitor. "Send them in," he called, not looking up from his computer. "We need to talk." Lucas glanced up to find Alexander standing in his doorway, expression uncharacteristically serious. "About the bet?" Lucas grinned. "Today's day 6. Clock's ticking. I want to call it off." The declaration hung between them. Lucas leaned back, studying his friend with narrowed eyes. "You're serious." "Completely. The wager was juvenile and reductive. Maya deserves better." Lucas whistled softly. "You've actually fallen for her. This isn't about feelings. It's about basic respect." "Bull. I've watched you negotiate billion-dollar deals without a flicker of discomfort. Now suddenly you're concerned about the moral implications of a friendly wager?" Lucas shook his head. "You're in deep, my friend." Alexander couldn't deny it. The past week had transformed him in ways he was still processing. Maya had become important to him. Her opinion, her respect, her presence in his life. "The terms were 7 days to make her agree to date you," Lucas continued. "From what you've shared, you're practically there. See it through, then tell her whatever you want afterward." "It's not that simple." "It is that simple. You're making it complicated because you're unaccustomed to genuine emotional involvement." Lucas's tone softened slightly. "Look, win the bet, donate the money to her favorite cause if that makes you feel better, then pursue the relationship honestly. Best of both worlds." Alexander recognized the pragmatic logic, even as discomfort lingered. "And if she discovers the truth?" "Cross that bridge if necessary. But with 1 day left, why risk $100 million that could fund her economic justice causes for years?" Put that way, it almost made sense. Almost. "I need to go," Alexander said. "I'm meeting Maya for breakfast." "Day 6 breakfast?" Lucas grinned. "Sounds promising for the wager." Alexander left without responding, the conversation heightening his discomfort rather than alleviating it. Maya valued authenticity and integrity above all else. The bet fundamentally violated both, yet Lucas had raised a valid point about the potential good $100 million could do for causes Maya championed. And with only 1 day remaining, perhaps seeing it through was the pragmatic choice. The quandary occupied him throughout breakfast with Maya at a small French bakery in the West Village. Though he participated in their conversation, part of his mind remained caught in ethical calculations. "You're distracted," Maya observed, breaking off a piece of almond croissant. "Just tired," he deflected. "How's the apartment this morning?" "Much better, thanks to your midnight intervention." She studied him over her coffee cup. "Though I'm still processing the fact that you showed up with a professional restoration team instead of, say, a mop." Resources should be leveraged when available, he replied with a small smile. Besides, I wanted to help, not make a symbolic gesture of minimal utility. Billionaire pragmatism at its finest. Is that criticism or observation? Observation. She reached across the table, briefly touching his hand. Thank you, genuinely. The casual contact sent warmth through him, amplifying his conflict. He wanted this, her company, her touch, her gradual opening to possibilities between them, but he wanted it honestly. I have a proposal, he said suddenly. Come to my place for dinner tonight. I'll cook. Maya's eyebrows rose. You cook? I have hidden depths, he replied with mock offense. Also, I make exactly 3 dishes well. You'll experience one of them. The billionaire's secret talents revealed, she teased. Then more seriously, I'd like that. They parted with tentative anticipation, the prospect of an evening in his private space creating an intimacy their public encounters had not. As Alexander headed to his office, his phone chimed with a text from Lucas. D-Day tomorrow. Status update? He ignored it, focusing instead on preparation for the evening. He stopped at specialty markets for ingredients, dismissed his housekeeper for the night, and spent time genuinely considering how his space would appear to Maya's critical eye. The penthouse was undeniably luxurious, floor-to-ceiling windows, museum-quality art, furniture whose simplicity belied its astronomical cost. Yet it lacked personal touches. No photos adorned the walls, no mementos cluttered the surfaces. It was a showcase rather than a home, exactly as Maya had intuited. Alexander made some hasty adjustments, adding books he actually read to visible shelves, displaying a small sculpture his grandfather had carved, creating some semblance of personal history in the pristine space. Maya arrived precisely at 7, wearing a simple blue dress that made her amber eyes more striking than ever. She carried a small potted plant, a house-warming gift, she explained with a touch of irony. Her assessment of his penthouse was characteristically direct. It's beautiful, she acknowledged, moving toward the wall of windows, but lonely somehow. I'm rarely here except to sleep, he admitted. It's more hotel suite than home. That explains it. She turned to him. You have all this space, but no evidence of actually living in it. I'm reconsidering many aspects of my life lately, he said quietly. Including this. Maya wandered his space, studying art pieces, running fingers along bookshelves, absorbing details. Alexander watched her, struck by how completely her presence transformed the atmosphere, adding warmth, vitality, critical assessment where there had been only sterile perfection. In his kitchen, a chef's dream rarely used, Alexander prepared risotto while Maya perched on a stool, sipping wine and sharing anecdotes about her day. The domesticity felt both foreign and surprisingly right. So tomorrow's your presentation to Columbia's economics department? He asked, stirring the risotto methodically. Yes, the fellowship committee wants preliminary findings from my research. She looked momentarily anxious. It's a significant opportunity to validate my approach. You'll be brilliant, he said with complete confidence. Your analysis is compelling and your passion is evident. Maya smiled, the genuine warmth in her expression making his chest tighten uncomfortably. Tomorrow marked the wager's conclusion. The contradiction between that artificial deadline and the authentic connection they'd built felt increasingly untenable. Maya, he began, determined to confess everything. There's something I should tell you about our first meeting. His phone rang, the specialized tone for his executive assistant. Alexander normally would have ignored it, but the late hour suggested genuine urgency. I'm sorry, I should check this. The call confirmed his concern. A crisis with their European division requiring immediate attention. A significant security breach threatened sensitive data, and decisions needed to be made within hours. I have to deal with this, he told Maya apologetically. It shouldn't take long. But as minutes stretched into an hour, the romantic evening he'd planned deteriorated into fragmented conversation between crisis management calls. Maya was understanding, but the intimate atmosphere had dissipated. "I should go," she said finally. "You clearly have important matters to handle." "Maya, I'm sorry. This isn't how I wanted tonight to unfold." "It's fine. I understand that billion-dollar empires occasionally need attention." Her smile softened the observation. "Rain check?" As he walked her to the elevator, Alexander felt time slipping away. Tomorrow was the wager's deadline, and he still hadn't told her the truth. "Tomorrow," he said impulsively. "Have dinner with me again tomorrow night, please." Maya hesitated. "Tomorrow's my presentation. I'm not sure what time I'll finish." "I'll wait," he promised, "however long it takes." She studied him, something in his intensity clearly communicating his need to see her. "Okay, I'll text you when I'm done." Alexander watched the elevator doors close, the weight of unspoken truth settling heavily upon him. Tomorrow he would tell her everything, about the wager, about his transformation, about the feelings he'd never expected to develop. He only hoped that when faced with the complete truth, she could forgive how their story had begun. Maya stood before Columbia's economics faculty, her presentation slides illustrating wealth distribution patterns across developed nations. The fellowship committee, 5 distinguished professors and 2 visiting scholars, watched with critical attention as she outlined her research methodology. These models demonstrate that stakeholder-driven economies consistently produce more stable growth patterns and reduced inequality metrics, Maya explained, highlighting comparative data. While shareholder primacy models show higher short-term returns, they create structural vulnerabilities that manifest during economic shocks. The department chair, Dr. Abernathy, leaned forward. "Your analysis challenges conventional economic orthodoxy. What evidence suggests these alternative models are scalable beyond small, homogeneous countries?" It was the question Maya had anticipated, the standard dismissal of Nordic examples as irrelevant to larger economies. She advanced to her prepared slide. Several multinational corporations have implemented modified stakeholder models with compelling results. She highlighted case studies, including one recent addition. Most notably, Blackwood Industries has begun implementing comprehensive stakeholder impact assessments across its divisions, with preliminary data showing improved employee retention, reduced environmental compliance costs, and enhanced community relations without significant profit reduction. The committee exchanged glances. Alexander's company adopting her principles made her theoretical framework suddenly undeniably relevant. "Your research suggests a fundamental restructuring of corporate governance," noted another professor. "What's your implementation pathway in a system resistant to such change?" Maya felt a surge of confidence. A week ago, this question would have exposed the idealistic limitations of her work. Now she had practical answers derived from her conversations with Alexander. "Change requires both external pressure and internal champions," she explained, echoing Alexander's words from the rally. "Regulatory frameworks create baselines, but transformation happens through demonstrating that stakeholder capitalism delivers sustainable advantage. When market leaders adopt these principles, competitors follow, not from moral awakening, but competitive necessity." For 90 minutes, Maya defended her research against rigorous questioning. When she finished, Dr. Abernathy nodded with reluctant respect. "Impressive work, Ms. Russo. The committee will deliberate and inform you of our decision regarding continued fellowship support." As the faculty filed out, Maya gathered her materials, exhausted but satisfied. She'd defended her life's work confidently, integrating theoretical frameworks with practical applications in ways that even skeptical economists couldn't easily dismiss. Her phone vibrated with a text from Alexander. "Thinking of you. Hope the presentation is going brilliantly. Still on for dinner tonight?" Maya smiled, typing back, "Just finished. Went well. Dinner sounds perfect. Need a few hours to decompress first. Take all the time you need. I'll be ready whenever you are. As Maya left the economics building, she noticed a sleek black car parked conspicuously near the entrance. The driver's window lowered, revealing a face she recognized from the business pages: Lucas Hayes, Alexander's CFO and friend. "Ms. Russo?" he called. "Lucas Hayes. I was hoping for a quick word." Maya approached cautiously. "Mr. Hayes, how did you know where to find me?" "Alexander mentioned your presentation." He smiled without warmth. "I was nearby for a meeting and thought I'd introduce myself. Perhaps we could grab coffee?" Everything about the situation felt off, but curiosity won out. "Briefly, I have plans tonight. With Alexander, I assume." Lucas led her to a nearby campus cafe. "That's actually what I wanted to discuss." Once seated with coffee, Lucas studied her with calculating eyes. "You've made quite an impression on him. I've known Alexander for 15 years, and I've never seen him so distracted." "I'm not sure that's any of your business," Maya replied coolly. "Ordinarily, I'd agree, but when my oldest friend and business partner starts making questionable decisions that affect our company, it becomes my concern. If you're referring to the stakeholder assessment framework, that's hardly radical. Many major corporations are adopting similar approaches." Lucas's eyebrows rose. "You're well informed about our internal business decisions." "Alexander and I discuss economic models. It's my field of study." "How convenient." Lucas sipped his coffee. "Tell me, Ms. Russo, what do you think Alexander sees in you?" The blunt question caught Maya off guard. "Excuse me?" "You're clearly intelligent, but you must recognize the disparities. Alexander moves in elite global circles. His previous relationships involved women of similar status, heiresses, executives, a European countess. Yet suddenly he's fascinated by a delivery person writing socialist manifestos." Maya stood, gathering her belongings. "This conversation is over. Did you know it began as a wager?" The words stopped her cold. "What did you say?" Lucas examined his watch casually. 7 days ago, Alexander bet me he could make you agree to date him within a week. $100 million against my admission that his transactional view of relationships was correct. Maya sank back into her chair, blood rushing in her ears. "You're lying." "Why would I?" Lucas pulled out his phone. "I have his daily updates. Would you like to hear his strategy for winning you over?" Before she could respond, he pressed play. Alexander's voice emerged, clinical and detached. "Day 1 of your ridiculous challenge. Initial contact established, though not as smoothly as anticipated. Maya recognized me, which complicated the approach. However, I've secured a coffee meeting for tomorrow." Lucas stopped the recording, studying Maya's stricken expression. "There are 6 more updates, each cataloging his progress in this little experiment." "Why are you showing me this?" "Because Alexander is considering major business decisions that affect thousands of employees and shareholders based on infatuation with someone he sought out as a conquest." Lucas leaned forward. "He may have developed genuine feelings since then. I actually believe he has. But you should understand how this began." Maya felt physically ill, her mind reframing every interaction through this new, horrifying lens. The bookstore visit, the coffee, the rally attendance, even the fellowship, all calculated steps in a strategic seduction. "Today marks day 7, Lucas continued. "The wager's deadline. He'll likely ask you to officially date him tonight." "Get out of my sight," Maya whispered, her voice shaking. "For what it's worth, I think he genuinely cares about you now. But this relationship was built on a foundation of manipulation and deceit." Lucas stood, placing his card on the table. "When you're ready to discuss how we might damage control his business decisions, call me." After he left, Maya sat motionless, piecing together the timeline. Their first meeting, her delivery to his office, occurred exactly 7 days ago. The wager explained Alexander's sudden appearance at the bookstore, his convenient interest in her research, His strategic adoption of her economic principles. Had anything been genuine? Or was she merely the subject of an elaborate, expensive game between privileged men with too much money and too little conscience? Maya gathered her things, her movements mechanical as she left the cafe. Outside, rain had begun falling, matching her darkening mood. She canceled her evening plans with a text to Zoe, needing solitude to process this betrayal. Across the city, Alexander was preparing for what he anticipated would be the most important dinner of his life. He'd dismissed his staff for complete privacy, personally selecting wines and ingredients. The dining table was set simply but elegantly, with candles and fresh flowers creating an intimate atmosphere. His phone rang. Lucas. "Not now," Alexander answered curtly. "We need to talk," Lucas insisted. "The board is concerned about these abrupt policy shifts. They're questioning your judgment." "The board can wait. I have plans tonight." "With Maya? It's day 7, you know, deadline day." Alexander's jaw tightened. "The wager is irrelevant." "Is it? $100 million for her pet causes would make quite an impression." "I'm telling her everything tonight," Alexander said firmly. "About the bet, about how my perspective has changed, about what she's come to mean to me." "Bold strategy," Lucas replied, his tone strange. "Good luck with that." Something in his friend's voice raised Alexander's suspicion. "Lucas, what have you done?" "Nothing that wasn't necessary. The company needs your full attention, not this misguided attempt to reinvent capitalism because you're infatuated with an economic justice warrior." Cold dread settled in Alexander's stomach. "Tell me you didn't contact her." "We had coffee after her presentation. Very enlightening conversation." "You told her about the bet." "It wasn't a question." She deserved to know the truth. As did our board members, who are now reconsidering your recent proposals. Alexander's grip tightened on his phone. "You had no right." "I had every right as your CFO, your friend, and someone who's witnessed you building this company for 15 years. This girl has you questioning everything you've created. Maybe some things deserve questioning." Alexander ended the call, immediately dialing Maya. No answer. He texted, "Maya, please call me. We need to talk." Nothing. Alexander grabbed his jacket, heading for the elevator. He had to find her, explain everything, somehow make her understand that what had begun as a callous wager had transformed into something authentic and profound. Rain was falling heavily when his car pulled up to Maya's apartment building. Alexander rushed to her door, knocking urgently. Zoe answered, her expression coldly hostile. "She's not here." "Where is she? I need to explain." "Explain what?" "How you made her the subject of a bet. How you manipulated her into caring about you." Zoe's voice dripped contempt. "She trusted you. Do you have any idea what that means for someone like Maya? How carefully she guards herself against exactly the kind of exploitation you represent?" "It started that way," Alexander admitted, rain dripping from his hair and clothes. "But it became something else, something real. Save it for someone who wasn't up all night with her after Lucas played her your little progress reports." Zoe began closing the door. "She doesn't want to see you. Ever. Please," Alexander's voice cracked. "Tell me where she is." Zoe hesitated, then sighed. "Nonna Flores. But I'm warning you, she's not alone. The entire restaurant staff treats her like family. They won't let you hurt her again." Alexander returned to his car, directing his driver to the Italian restaurant. Rain pounded the windows, matching his turbulent thoughts. How could he possibly explain? The truth sounded hollow even to his own ears. "Yes, I approached you because of a wager, but I accidentally developed genuine feelings while trying to manipulate you." When they arrived at Flores, the restaurant was closed, but lights glowed inside. Alexander approached the door, knocking gently. Nonna Flori herself answered, her usual warm expression replaced with protective hostility. "You," she said flatly. "You have some nerve coming here." Please, I need to speak with Maya." "She doesn't want to speak with you. You think because you have money you can play with people's hearts? That girl has suffered enough without rich men treating her like a game." Through the door's window, Alexander caught a glimpse of Maya sitting at a back table, her posture defeated, Florie's nephew Antonio protectively seated beside her. "I made a terrible mistake," Alexander admitted, "but what grew between us is real. Please, just 5 minutes." "No more chances," Florie declared firmly. "Maya says you're finished, so you're finished. Go back to your tower, Mr. Billionaire. There's nothing for you here." The door closed definitively. Through the glass, Alexander watched as Florie returned to Maya, embracing her with maternal tenderness. The family she'd created surrounded her, offering comfort, protection, unconditional acceptance. All the things his money couldn't buy. All the things he'd thoughtlessly risked for a juvenile wager. Alexander stood in the rain, the magnitude of his loss washing over him. In 1 week, Maya had transformed his worldview, awakened dormant parts of his humanity, and shown him what genuine connection felt like. Now she was lost to him, and he had no one to blame but himself. Slowly he turned and walked back to his waiting car, the rain mingling with what might have been tears on his face. 3 weeks passed without a word between them. Alexander threw himself into work with renewed intensity, but the focus had shifted. The stakeholder assessment framework moved forward despite board resistance. He initiated a comprehensive audit of labor practices across all subsidiaries. Environmental impact reports became required reading before any expansion decisions. The business press buzzed with speculation about Blackwood Industries' apparent philosophical pivot. Some praised the progressive shift, others questioned Alexander's judgment. Stock prices fluctuated as markets attempted to price in this new direction. Alexander barely noticed. He functioned automatically, making decisions with clinical precision while feeling hollowed out inside. The penthouse seemed more sterile than ever. He found himself avoiding the corner table at Harvest, the bench in Central Park, all the places that now held echoes of Maya. Lucas had attempted reconciliation, arguing he'd acted in both the company's and Alexander's best interests. Their 15-year friendship hung by a thread, professional courtesy barely masking Alexander's seething sense of betrayal. "You're still implementing her ideas," Lucas observed during a tense budget meeting, "despite everything." "They're sound economic principles," Alexander replied coldly. "The merit exists independently of personal feelings." But personal feelings remained, persistent and painful. Alexander had drafted countless messages to Maya, explanations, apologies, pleas for another chance, deleting each without sending. What could he possibly say that wouldn't sound like more manipulation? Meanwhile, Maya had received the official notification that her fellowship had been renewed with expanded funding. The committee had unanimously approved her continued research, impressed by her innovative integration of theoretical models with practical applications. The victory felt hollow. She moved mechanically through her days, completing deliveries, attending classes, working on her thesis. At night, she found herself rereading the economic impact assessments Alexander had shared, his handwritten notes in the margins revealing genuine engagement with concepts that challenged his entire business model. "You need to talk to him," Zoe said one evening, finding Maya staring at her phone, Alexander's last text still unanswered. "There's nothing to say. He approached me as a bet, a game between rich friends with too much money and too little humanity. Yet he's implementing your ideas at his company. The business journals are calling it the Blackwood Reformation." Maya had seen the articles. Alexander was facing significant pushback from investors and board members, yet continuing the stakeholder-focused changes they'd discussed. "Maybe it's genuine change," Zoe continued. "Maybe you actually affected him." "Or maybe it's elaborate damage control," Maya countered. "Another strategic move." Yet doubt had begun creeping in. If Alexander's interest had been purely strategic, why maintain policies that faced significant resistance? Why continue initiatives that directly reduced short-term profits? The bet was long over, lost or abandoned. These actions served no manipulative purpose. On a rainy Tuesday, Maya was shelving books at Forward when the door chimed. She turned to find not Alexander, but Lucas Hayes. "Before you throw a book at me," he began, raising his hands defensively, "I came to admit I was wrong." "Get out," Maya said quietly, returning to her shelving. Lucas remained. "Alexander doesn't know I'm here. In fact, he barely speaks to me anymore except about essential business matters." Tragic. The manipulative Billionaire Boys Club is experiencing friction. "I showed you his recordings," Lucas acknowledged, "but I didn't play all of them. The later ones tell a different story." Maya stilled, her back to him. "The Alexander Blackwood I've known for 15 years has never questioned his approach to business or relationships. Success through strategic advantage was his religion." Lucas stepped closer. "Then he met you and everything changed. Save the redemption narrative for someone who hasn't been personally victimized by your little game. The game ended weeks ago. What he's doing now, restructuring company policies, antagonizing the board, jeopardizing relationships with key investors, that's not strategy, that's conviction." Lucas placed a small recording device on the counter. "Listen to the full story before you dismiss him completely." After he left, Maya stared at the device for long minutes before finally pressing play. Alexander's voice emerged, the familiar confidence of the early recordings gradually shifting to something more vulnerable, more genuine with each day's entry. Day 4. Maya's perspective on sustainability metrics has significant merit, though implementation across a multinational corporation presents complex challenges. I find myself genuinely engaged with her critiques in ways I hadn't anticipated. Day 5. The rally provided unexpected insights. These aren't fringe radicals, but concerned citizens with legitimate grievances about systemic inequalities. Maya's academic framework contextualizes these concerns with remarkable clarity. I'm beginning to see my business through a different lens. Day 6. The wager seems increasingly inappropriate. Maya deserves better than strategic manipulation, regardless of how benevolent my intentions might seem. And finally, Day 7. The morning before everything collapsed. I'm ending this ridiculous exercise. Whatever happens with Maya should develop naturally, without artificial deadlines or stakes. More importantly, I need to tell her the truth, even if it means losing her. The connection we've formed matters too much for continued deception. Maya sat heavily on a nearby chair, conflicting emotions churning. The transformation in Alexander's tone and content was unmistakable, from calculated strategy to genuine self-reflection. He had planned to come clean before Lucas's intervention. That evening, she found herself walking toward Blackwood Tower, still uncertain what she intended to say. The security desk called up for clearance, and minutes later, she was ascending to the penthouse in a private elevator. Alexander opened the door himself, surprise and cautious hope momentarily illuminating his features before careful neutrality returned. He looked different, thinner, shadows beneath his eyes suggesting sleepless nights. Maya. Her name sounded like both a question and a prayer. "Lucas came to see me," she said, stepping inside. "He played your recordings. All of them?" She nodded. The penthouse was different too. Books and papers spread across surfaces, evidence of actual living disrupting its former sterile perfection. "I was going to tell you everything that night," Alexander said quietly, before Lucas interfered. "Would that have made a difference, that you confessed to manipulation after succeeding at it?" "I don't know." He gestured toward the living room. "But I would have tried to explain that what began as something inexcusable became the most genuine connection I've ever experienced." Maya remained standing, maintaining emotional distance. "You built a relationship on a foundation of deceit. Yes. No excuses, no justifications. I have no defense for how this began. Yet you're implementing the changes we discussed. Stakeholder assessments, labor practice reviews, environmental impact requirements. Why? Because they're the right thing to do. Alexander met her gaze directly. Perhaps the only thing I can offer as evidence of genuine change is that I'm continuing the work that matters to you, even without hope of your forgiveness. The simple honesty in his statement resonated more deeply than any elaborate apology could have. Maya slowly moved to the window, gazing out at the city sprawled below. "I trusted you," she said finally. "Do you have any idea how difficult that was for me?" "I do now." Alexander remained where he was, giving her space. "I've spent weeks trying to imagine what you must have felt learning about the wager. The betrayal, the humiliation, the questioning of everything we shared. I couldn't separate what was real from what was strategy. All of it became real," he said softly. "Every conversation, every shared meal, every moment challenging each other's perspectives. What began as arrogant gamesmanship transformed into something I'd never experienced, genuine connection without performance or expectation." Maya turned to face him. "The wager was for 7 days. Today would have been the deadline. I conceded weeks ago. Lucas won." "What were the exact terms?" Alexander hesitated. "I had to make you agree to date me within 7 days without revealing my wealth or status." "And if you lost?" "I would donate $100 million to your choice of charity and admit that not everything in life can be negotiated." Maya's expression shifted subtly. "And if you'd succeeded?" "Lucas would stop lecturing me about finding authentic connection." Alexander shook his head ruefully. "Ironic, considering authentic connection is exactly what I found, then destroyed." Maya was quiet for a long moment, processing. "You're actually changing your business practices. Not as performance, but substantively. Your perspectives made undeniable sense, both ethically and practically. I couldn't unlearn that understanding, even when the personal connection was broken." Another silence stretched between them. "I'm not ready to forgive you," Maya said finally. "The manipulation, the recordings, the fundamental dishonesty of how we began, that requires more than good intentions to repair." Alexander nodded, accepting her judgment. "But," she continued, "I believe your transformation might be genuine. The changes you're implementing will positively impact thousands of lives. That matters, regardless of how I feel personally." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm willing to continue our conversations about economic models and implementation strategies." Maya's expression remained guarded. "Professionally, as colleagues with shared intellectual interests." It was more than Alexander had dared hope for, yet less than he desperately wanted. "Thank you. Whatever terms you're comfortable with." We begin again, with complete honesty. No recording, no manipulation, no strategic calculations. "Agreed." Maya moved toward the door, then paused. "The donation. The $100 million you would have contributed if you lost the wager. What happens to that now?" "It's been transferred," Alexander said quietly, "to the Economic Justice Foundation. Your name isn't attached, but the focus areas align with your research." Maya's composure faltered slightly. "You didn't have to do that. You didn't technically lose. I lost something far more valuable than money." His voice was raw with honesty. "And somehow supporting causes you believe in felt like the only meaningful gesture I could make, even knowing you might never speak to me again." The authenticity in his voice reached something in Maya that rational judgment couldn't access. Not forgiveness yet, but perhaps the seed of possibility. "Coffee," she said suddenly. "We could start with coffee. Thursday afternoon at Hazelnut Cafe." Alexander's expression brightened cautiously. "Just coffee? No expectations?" "Just two people with mutual intellectual interests." Maya offered a tentative smile. "The rest? We'll see. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Not yet. Trust, once broken, required patient rebuilding. But as Maya left the penthouse, both recognized the fragile beginning of something potentially stronger than what had come before. A connection based not on manipulation or idealization, but on genuine understanding of each other's flaws and strengths. 6 months later, the Economic Justice Foundation announced its first major initiative, a sustainable business incubator offering minority entrepreneurs resources, mentorship, and capital. The press release noted collaborative development between foundation experts and Blackwood Industries advisors. Photos from the launch event showed Alexander and Maya standing alongside community leaders. Not touching, not overtly romantic, but clearly united in purpose. The caption identified Maya Russo as lead economic strategist and Alexander Blackwood as principal foundation supporter. What the photos didn't capture was the gradual healing that had occurred over countless coffee meetings, professional collaborations, and cautious steps toward rebuilding trust. Nor did they reveal the dinner shared afterward at Nonna Flori's, where the formidable matriarch had finally deemed Alexander possibly worthy of second chance. The bet that had begun their story was long forgotten by most, but sometimes when discussing particularly complex economic models, Maya would tease Alexander about his former certainty that everything in life could be negotiated. Some things, he would acknowledge with a smile that belonged only to her, are wonderfully, impossibly beyond transaction. They can only be earned through genuine change. And that, the capacity for transformation, for becoming more than the sum of past mistakes, was perhaps the most valuable discovery of all. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.